Have you ever discovered a secret about your family that made you realize your entire modest upbringing was actually a carefully constructed lie? My name is Sarah, and I grew up in a house where we pinched every penny. We shopped at thrift stores, skipped summer vacations, and I worked 2 jobs through college to avoid debt. My mom, a single parent, always told me we were struggling but proud. She played the role of the hardworking martyr so well that I spent my 20s feeling guilty for every dollar I spent on myself. But last month, while cleaning out the crawl space of our old family home after she moved into assisted living, I found a rusted lockbox hidden behind a loose foundation stone. I thought it would be old photos or maybe some jewelry. Instead, I found a stack of bank statements and a legal deed that turned my world upside down. The statements were for a trust fund in my name, established by my biological father, a man mom told me had abandoned us with nothing before I was even born. The balance on the most recent statement was over $2 million. I sat on the dusty basement floor, my heart pounding in my ears as I realized that the struggle I'd lived through wasn't a necessity, it was a choice. My mother had been receiving monthly disbursements for my upkeep since I was 3 years old, but she had never spent a dime of it on me. I went to the assisted living facility that afternoon, the documents clutched in my shaking hands. I expected her to be ashamed or to tell me she was saving it for my future. Instead, she looked at me with a chilling coldness and said, "If you had grown up rich, you would have ended up like your father, entitled and soft. I didn't lie to you, Sarah, I forged you." The betrayal felt like a physical weight in my chest. Every time I had to sit out a field trip, every time I wore shoes that were too small, every time I cried because I couldn't afford a prom dress, she had the money. She watched me suffer to satisfy some twisted moral experiment she designed in her head. But the twist goes deeper. As I dug through the rest of the box, I found a series of letters from my father. They weren't from a man who had abandoned us. They were desperate pleas from a man who had been barred from seeing me by a restraining order my mother had obtained through a series of false allegations. He hadn't left us. She had kidnapped me from a life of comfort and kept us in poverty to ensure I would never go looking for the truth. I spent the next week tracking him down, expecting a tearful reunion. I found him in a small town 3 states away, living in a modest house, his health failing. When I showed up at his door, he didn't even recognize me at first, but when I told him my name, he broke down. He told me that my mother had threatened to disappear me forever if he ever tried to contact me again, so he had spent 20 years quietly funneling every cent of his successful business into that trust, hoping that one day I'd find it and realize he never stopped loving me. He had lived like a hermit, sacrificing his own comfort just to ensure I had a safety net he wasn't allowed to provide in person. The shocking ending. My mother didn't just keep the money from me, she had been using a portion of it to pay a private investigator to watch my father for 2 decades. She wanted to make sure he never found a new family, never moved on, and stayed miserable in his exile. She had ruined 2 lives out of pure, unadulterated spite. Today, I've moved my father into a top-tier medical facility using the trust money, and I've cut my mother off entirely. The woman who taught me the value of a dollar is now finding out what it's like to actually have nothing, as I've used the legal proof of her fraud to reclaim every cent she tried to gatekeep. I'm finally living the life I was supposed to have, but the girl who grew up in the thrift stores is still there, wondering if you can ever truly buy back 20 years of lost time.